This is day 4 of the February 93 7-day retreat in Springwater. This morning, can we enter into something that comes up so frequently with all of us? Fear. And enter into it the way it began to happen yesterday in a group meeting. Which brought up questions such as, is it possible to remain with fear? One person saying, I can choose to remain with fear and not escape. And someone else said, choosing is always to get away from something. I choose not to be with fear. I choose to escape. Being with it, entering into it, is not a choice. The choice is to escape. Can we look at all of that right now here as we're sitting quietly on a beautiful sunny morning? The snow heightening the light and brightness of the day. This whole question of choice is such a sticky one. I can choose to do this, I can choose not to do that. And it often leads to beating ourselves. Why do I choose to do this and not choose to do that? I'm free to choose. We're all created free to choose. I have a tremendous amount of assumptions and ideas about it. But can we look what's actually happening, which takes attention gathering in the questioning and in the looking. Not just my opinion versus your opinion. That way we can argue day in and day out and never get at what's really happening. So, do we need to ask, first of all, what is it that we call fear? Fear is what came up yesterday. It could be at any time for anyone replaced by anger, pain, jealousy. Whatever one needs to be looking into, maybe for the first time in a new way. So yesterday it was fear. What do we call fear? What do we mean actually, concretely, when we say I am afraid or I have fear? Can we bring something up in the mind? The mind has that capacity to bring up something, a memory of what causes us to say, I'm afraid, I've got fear. Maybe the thought of something that happened in the past, pain, having been left by someone, abandoned, to happen again. And that thought, coming from memory of what happened, projected into what one calls the future. Arousing what? What do we call fear? We can feel it. We can open up to what's happening. Not just stay with the word fear, but say, what is it that I'm describing with this word? And all kinds of new sensations that weren't there a moment ago before the thought. Now with a thought, there's a sensation. There are sensations in the musculature, in the intestines, in the stomach, in the breathing, in the heart. Changes of pace, of tension, or a rising of tension where there was no tension before. Maybe some blood rising to the head, a feeling of narrowing down of the senses, closing down, shaking, whatever. Aroused by the thought, something is going to happen to me. Something is going to happen to the world. Something is going to happen to my beloved partner or child. There can be any thought for each one of us. I did something wrong. I will be found out. What will they think of me? And instantly a change in sensations throughout the body, a change in functioning. Sweat in the armpits, maybe. The thought, I did something, and something is going to happen to me. That projection, it can be very vivid, it can be vague, based on what was experienced in the past, or based on what I read in the newspaper, or what somebody just told me happened to him or her. These thoughts, this imaging, fantasizing, projecting, arouses an instant change throughout the body, which is felt and may be labeled as uncomfortable, painful, diseasing, upsetting. That's very familiar to all of us, but is it familiar to all of us to really feel it out? If the thought, what will happen to me, or could happen to me, with its vivid paintings in the mind, persists, bringing up new specters, further possibilities, this feeling will remain, these sensations throughout the body will remain, maybe aggravate, get worse. The more thought, the more sensations and upset throughout the organism about what could happen to me. If for some reason the thought drops out, it's just a moment and then it goes, does not sustain itself, then the organism will settle down again. That is experienceable by each one of us. Or the upset organism itself, without any further input of what could happen to me, the feeling of upset seems to signal something to the brain. Something dangerous is going to happen. just because the way I feel, a new thought arises, the other one wasn't noticed, it escaped the attention, it's gone. But the feeling itself, tense, queasy, palpitating, sweaty, this state of being indicates there must be something to be afraid of. And the brain will scan quickly and effectively for possibilities of what could happen to me. This all comes out of direct observation, not from reading it someplace. And is observable by each one of us. Because I'm quite sure, also from comparing notes with people who have observed similarly, that these processes are very much alike for all of us. They're not unique for one individual. They're generic. In the genes, maybe. To respond organismically to danger. Get the body ready for fight or flight or freeze. And any thought which may not be produced by any real danger, seen or heard, can get the body going in the same way as if there was real acute danger. Somebody about to throw a rock at me, or a tree about to topple over on top of me. Fire gutting the house. Then to run or to duck or freeze may be the appropriate response. The body does its work well. But to sit someplace in an office or lie in bed or on the mat here and these thoughts arising, the body feels inappropriately agitated. Has no real need to feel this way, no need to run or fight, and therefore this stuff is like a burden. That another thought coming up says, shake it, get rid of it, this feels awful. Get through it, fight it. All kinds of suggestions coming up from our immense reservoir of ideas of what to do about discomfort and pain. A reservoir that is partly our parents' and society's reservoir, implanted in us. And thoughts popping up from that. Do this, do that. And from our own experience, calling up a friend, turning on the television, getting a drink of water or a drink of alcohol, lighting a cigarette, taking drugs, anything not to feel this unpleasant agitation, which is already labeled in the mind as fear, having fear, or being upset, and the new thoughts get away from it. And the power of those thoughts to fulfill or to gratify the need for not feeling the way one is feeling at the moment. There are other mechanisms in this body-mind which are amazing to shut off something which is called repression, to shut off feeling of fear or pain. It's possible for the brain to do that. Not to feel anything anymore. It happens very early in our childhood. Quite a bit of stuff has been buried, maybe sort of electrochemically isolated, so that the current doesn't run through the memory of that experience and whatever is associated with this experience, which can draw wider and wider circles. More and more may remind one of something very heavy, very painful, very frightening. So, not trying to touch this or this or this anymore, see this or that, whatever reminds one of that painful experience is all now gets a tinge of that dread and fear. Or danger, better way of putting it. So that mechanism also operates, that mechanism of repression or shutting down. People mention this in the course of doing what we call this work is not really a good word. Sitting, looking, questioning, opening up to what's there. All kinds of stuff bubbles up for some people at certain times. It's never been remembered in ages. And is there to be looked at, and the connection is there. Or remembering, one person told me, when I was 5 years old, I decided to die to the scared child. And I did. It was gone. I became very brilliant in school. Did very well. And that was my new security in existence. To be all head. And no feelings and sensations throughout the body. Very little. I always kept saying, I don't feel anything. What do you mean by feeling? But this may not be forever. Even something shut down very early can open up in this quiet questioning and wondering about what's there when there is a queasy or upsetting feeling. This was not quite logical, saying there is no feeling. But things begin to awaken again. We said that yesterday or the day before, that with quiet looking and wondering and observing ourselves in relationship, our upsets, there is an increasing sensitivity. The body wakes up again to itself, to its own subtle manifestations. And probably when it's safe and doesn't need to be repressed again, more of the shutdown opens up. That happens. It has happened. Of course, one can go to therapies, and that can be very helpful for people. But we were asking, where is choice in all of this? Where do I come in? This feeling of I am choosing to be aware, I am choosing to go into this, or I am choosing to turn away from it, to escape from it. It's a matter of speaking. We have learned to talk that way and to believe that way, that there is an I in all of that that is controlling or choosing or repressing or fearing or escaping. That's how we've learned to believe and to speak, and everybody else around us speaks in the same way. And if one tries not to speak in this way, it's very difficult. It creeps in very quickly. But in the descriptions that we gave before, there was no need for saying I at all. We were talking in terms of the processes, the thoughts coming up, the pictures, what the body manifests, then other thoughts arising, suggesting pleasurable states from memory, or shutting down, the body shutting down automatically with its own mechanisms inbuilt genetically. in nowhere was there the need of talking about I, or choice for that matter. Does that invite further looking? Is that a challenge? The challenge of choice. We say it all the time. We were raised this way. It seems to be the principle on which we operate. Free choice, freedom to choose. What do we mean by that? And not argue. Yes, we have it. No, we don't have it. That's what I used to do in my teens. I loved to argue and debate with people. Do we have free choice? Or is there predetermination? Or is everything chance? And anyone I could engage in this kind of debate or discussion, I loved it. And I had my opinions what it was. I don't remember right now what it was. Chance or free choice or predestination. But different people, of course, came from different points of view. You can argue and argue and argue and feel good if you feel you're winning and feel badly if you think the other one is. Of course, sometimes we bring up a discussion like this in order because we feel unsure with our own position and we want to adopt a surer one. And the way we do that is go with somebody who seems convincing, has sort of authority in his or her speech and manner, or books which sound like very authoritative. Person must have thought a lot, consulted a lot of resources. And so I'll go with the author's position. That's also why we debate or seek for answers on that level. But somehow this became stale. Why, I don't remember. It was just not satisfying. It did not fulfill a deeper need to find out something more directly. There was this groping for many, many years, and is for many people. Somebody told me this yesterday or today. Long before I ever heard of this place or Zen or spiritual paths, that was questioning in me. I needed to find out. Let's see the beautiful, marvelous thing that it happens in human beings all over the world, all over the times. This deeply felt urge and yearning to find out truth for oneself. Not to find out truth. For oneself is not so clear because there are so many authorities. But if what authorities provide doesn't quite make sense or it cannot quite be seen by oneself, can one look for oneself with each other or alone or both? Not trying to convince each other, but pooling our energies to look together, to question and look and listen together. It's a tremendous thing for human beings to do. And it works. It can work. To pool energies in mutual looking and questioning. Not in order to satisfy the ego, being good at this, being top winner of the debate. That itself can become something to question together, whether this is operating. People say that sometimes after a group meeting, actually quite frequently. People feel bad about their speaking in the group and feel I try to dominate this thing or make something out of myself. I'm sorry I did that. But one can learn something about oneself without needing to blame oneself or put oneself down. This is all something is coming into view in the silence and energy of doing this together, there's more of a chance to see what is going on for oneself and each other. So is there a chooser, a controller? Someone who has fear. Someone who chooses to repress or to escape. If so, let me find him or her. I don't want to believe anything what someone else says. Let me find this I, this me, this doer, this controller, this chooser, this haver of pain, fear, pleasure. And all I may come up with is thoughts about it, language impersonating this. The way I put it is the way I believe it, is the way I feel it. Check it out for yourselves. It's all up for grabs. But it takes some energy and interest in looking. One person was saying this suddenly, with the same fear that's been going on for years and retreats and times, suddenly there was some curiosity to ask, what is this? And with that, the barrier was gone. Suddenly there was this no division, and there just being this thing one had called pain or fear, and it wasn't the same anymore, is what she reported. And she said it's just such a fine hairbreadth of a line between just what is it and no division, and not wanting it or wanting to get through this thing. The idea, I got to get through this, through the tunnel, somebody said. The imagining of this being a deep, dark tunnel that I have got to get through to the other side. That's not being with what's there. It's bringing up an image and then thinking in terms of this image what one has to do. And that there is also me who has to do it. All of it unquestioned stuff. Taken over by the brain and body from since we were born, or maybe we're already born with it. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll find out that some I and me feelings are already DNA'd. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. There's no experimentation on that. It'll be very hard. Because before thought arises, is there already a feeling of me, or is that inextricably linked with thinking about myself? For the longest time, the little child doesn't say me or I. It uses the name that is heard. Parents calling Paul or Anne. I remember my mother always saying about little children, it's a tremendous step in the development when the little child says I. So I took that over and always watched for when does a little child say I, and then I said it's a tremendous step. It's taken. I heard it, I continued it. Maybe it is, I'm not denying it, but what is it? What is going on? We may not be able to look for ourselves what happened when we were little children saying I and me for the first time, but can we see now how it constantly wakes up again, reborn? I did this, I shouldn't. He did this to me. I feel sorry for myself. And the way we put it gets the whole body going in feelings of pain, sorrow, pity, anger, resentment. Does this make sense? To question the whole thing of I choose. Not just the choice, but what is the I? I control. I do this and that. What is that? Let's look at it alone and together. Whether there's anything but thoughts, ancient thoughts, predating my life by thousands and thousands and maybe millions of years. Seeing and feeling oneself as an individual entity with freedom to choose. Right or wrong, says the Bible. God gave us this freedom. And I believe it. Because I talk that way, everybody else talks this way, and it seems that way. Because I pick a green apple over a red apple after all. Right now the green ones are gone, so there's no choice. Why do I pick a green apple? Why do I choose? I put it this way. But the memory of a green apple is better than the memory of a red apple. And this is what the body-mind wants, is pleasure in eating, repeating remembered pleasure of juices mixing up in the mouth with their fragrance and sweetness and sourness, the tasting, the swallowing of it. So the hand reaches for the green apple. I could say I chose it, but there's much more basic stuff going on, which is open to seeing. It can become transparent. If one doesn't insist, one knows how it is. And then we don't see anything. We just perpetuate or reinforce our beliefs and ideas. So can one question all the assumptions that come, reveal themselves in the course of being together for a week and then at home again? It's a bit harder, it's less quiet, it's more agitated, active. But it doesn't mean assumptions about my wife, my children, my husband, my work can't reveal themselves for their power of determining behavior and reactions. What I assume about him or her. We talked at length about images that the brain manufactures and keeps in memory, ready to pop up when the real person arrives. The image pops up and masquerades for the real one. And we don't know it until we question everything. Why do we do it? Why do it? It may seem so cumbersome. But we live in the most cumbersome way with ourselves and each other, due to the misfit of our images and projected ideas with reality. We are afraid when there's no reason to be afraid. Growing up in Germany, in my family, the pre-war years, a Jewish mother, I was afraid of everything. And I was told that too. The family reinforced that image. You worry for all of us, my mother would say, or my father. Here goes the worrier again. And I could raise any specter of something happening to us, from a bomb, from the persecution, from whatever. Always imagining things that could happen. And one day I reviewed that very much later. And I realized hardly any of what I had imagined happened. And here was this little scared child. And the potential for doing this hasn't disappeared. It has gotten much less strong, because being much more here now is less opportunity for imagination to arise. And that's the only security, if you want to call it that way, that we human beings have, is to be here now. Open. Out of that comes an energy that feels, can handle whatever comes up, including dying, if the time is there for that. That's something I couldn't hardly even think about, always afraid of dying. Now I can think about it, it doesn't scare me. There's a feeling, all right, we'll meet it when it comes up. And we can meet anything. Pain, we pain. Starve, we starve. Why be afraid of it before it has happened? This also happens in more present attention, awareness. The realization that projected consequences can be met when they arise. And therefore, there isn't this need to project them all the time. And yet when there's the need, the projection operates. I know walking downhill, I've fractured an ankle twice and once a wrist by slipping. And something now is programmed in this organism to be, quote unquote, afraid of slipping. But there's also a realism there, testing out with the boot whether the surface is slippery. One day here, last couple days, Kyle and I turned around. The driveway was too slippery. Neither one of us wanted to slip down, and possibility of breaking something, particularly great at our age. So we turned around, drove someplace, and then walked on the level. This isn't this scared feeling. It's a realistic assessment, as realistic as can be, of possible consequences, and of course not wanting to have broken limbs. But the body tenses up, I notice. So I feel funny in my body these days from all this slippery, snowy walking. The anticipation of slipping is not just mental, it's physical. The body is not as relaxed and loose when that possibility looms mentally. It also is there physically, the bracing against possible accidents. But it's interesting to become aware of it all, and even becoming aware of a tensed leg when the surface is all right, it has been tested out, can mean that the tension goes, that the leg can relax again. Without awareness, it just goes on in a habitual way. It's just marvelous what can be revealed and changed in that revelation. By that I mean revelation of a fear, of a thought, of an imagination. Becoming transparent to oneself. Right now I hear someone saying in a meeting, the memory comes up, I don't know whether this work that you're doing here is for me. It reminds me of something I did 10 years ago, which is therapy. Meditation is something different for me. What is meditation for one? That's a legitimate question in a place calling itself a center for meditative inquiry. What is meditation? And I don't want to compare it to therapy because maybe similar things can go on in both. Meditation, isn't it allowing whatever is there to come to light without immediately judging, throwing it out, tensing against it, or if that is happening, that comes to light, the tensing, the desire to, or the thought, I don't want this. To let be transparent what is going on so dimly, darkly in our body-mind, in our normal way of being. To let it be seen, let it be transparent. And yet not focusing on it exclusively in order to change it, to become a better person, more adjusted, healthier. And not with a particular purpose, but because it's there. It's there. And what is there, why not have it face the light of day? Together with the glistening snow and the birds feeding in flocks or singly at the bird feeder. The blue hills and the clouds, snowstorms and wind, sounds and sights. Let it all be there, what is there. Without trying to manipulate it. Or if the urge to manipulate it comes up, can it become transparent so it doesn't control? And the questions that come up, what am I without all of my habitual ideas about me and I? Or what are these habitual ideas? Can they come to light as they manifest and affect this body? And whatever other questions come out of this one, if there is no image of myself for an instant, or whatever the length of time, no image about myself, just what is, the sun and snow and people, stomachs gurgling and breath and movement, then what am I? Not taking what the files say, you are an individual or you are this, not taking that. I want to find out directly, experientially, immediately what I am, without my habitual conventional ideas about myself. And about you. And if fear arises at such a question, sometimes people say, this question scares me. I want to know why. And then focus on it. Listen to it. What thoughts come up that cause this body to cringe or shudder? And close down and say, I don't want to think this anymore. And maybe it's all right to ask a question and remain with it. Not out of choice, but there's something that propels us interest, curiosity, a yearning to find out what's true. We will end here for today.